So we've been examining quadratic equations from all different sorts of perspectives, right? We have graphed quadratic equations, right? Parabolas. We have factored quadratic equations. Now we're going to look at another way to solve quadratic equations, and that's with something called the quadratic formula. And the first piece of that is something called the discriminant. So we're going to be solving equations, and the discriminant just tells you how many answers there are and what kind. So now you might be saying, hey, what is the discriminant? Well, there's a nice little formula for it, and it's based off of our standard form for quadratics. I'm going to get out of this gray pencil mode. So we have our standard form for quadratics is ax squared, right, plus bx plus some c value, right? And that's when the equation is equal to 0. So we're going to take the coefficients, a, b, and c, those numbers out of the equation, and we're going to use them to find the discriminant. The discriminant formula is b squared minus 4 times the a value times the c value. So that 4 is built into the equation. No matter if there's a 4 in the problem or not, that 4 is part of the discriminant equation. And so visually, there's 3 different ways that your parabola could look. So if you have a positive discriminant, so if you do that formula and you get a positive number, what it tells you is that you have 2 real answers. So they could be whole numbers, fractions, or decimals. That's what a real number is. Visually, what that means is that you have 2 x-intercepts. So when we go to draw our parabola, right, we're going to have a parabola that crosses twice. That's all that is saying. If you have a discriminant of 0, so if you do b squared minus 4ac, you plug that formula into your calculator and you get an answer of 0, what that is telling you is that you have 1 real answer. So again, that could be a whole number, a fraction, or a decimal. What that tells us is that you only have 1 x-intercept. That's what the picture is going to look like. So when we go to draw a parabola, let's draw a downwards facing one this time. Right? It just tells us that that parabola only touches the x-axis once, and it's going to be at the vertex point of that parabola. Right? So if you have a negative discriminant, if you do this formula, b squared minus 4ac, and you get a negative, what that tells you is that you have 2 imaginary answers. So you're going to have i's in your answers. You're going to have an I in the answer. Graphically, what that tells us, what the picture looks like, is that there are no x-intercepts. Right? Because if we had x-intercepts, they would be real numbers because we're only graphing real numbers on the coordinate plane. So what our picture is going to look like is something like this. Like, it's not touching the x-axis at all. So we're just going to start by identifying a, b, and c values, so pulling those coefficients out of our quadratic equations and plugging them into our formula. And we're going to use a calculator to do all of the heavy lifting for us. So when we go into this formula, right, I've set it up the first couple that it's going to walk you right through it. So our a value is the number in front of x squared. So our a value is 1. Our b value, right, is the whole value in front of the x, so the negative and the 2. And our c value is the 1 at the end. So when we go to plug into our formula, we're just following the discriminant formula, b squared minus 4ac. So b is negative 2. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy calculator. I'm going to move it out of the way so I can see everything, and I'm going to type it in exactly as it appears. So negative 2 squared in parentheses minus 4 times 1 times 1. Right? It looks exactly how it's typed on my paper. I hit enter and I get a 0. right? So that's my discriminant value of 0. And then I also want to determine the number and type of solutions. So if I go up, right, if I have a 0 discriminant, that's the wrong one. If I have a 0 discriminant, right, it means I have one real answer. I have one x-intercept. So I'm going to answer this as saying I have one real answer. Let's cross off that so we're grammatically correct. Okay, let's try it again. So we have 1x squared again. So my a value is 1 plus 4x plus 6. Oh, and there's a typo in there. Right, that's a double positive. That doesn't even make sense. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, right? We're just plugging it into our formula. So b squared becomes 4 squared minus 4 times my a value of 1 times my c value of 6. Pull out our handy dandy calculator. Try and move it over to the other side of the screen so we're not covering anything, right? We just type it in as it appears. And we get -8 for our answer. So if our discriminant is -8, remember that tells us that we have no x-intercepts, which means that we have 2 imaginary solutions. So we have 2 imaginary answers. Okay, so the next two, right, little less scaffolding, right? I gave you places to write down where A, B, and C are, but I didn't give you all the blanks to fill in. So we're going to be writing that out ourselves this time. So for this question, right, we have that our A value is 2, right? Our B value is 5, and our C value is 3. So when I go to write my discriminant formula, I'm going to do my discriminant equals, okay, so it's B squared minus 4 times A times C. I'm just going to plug in my numbers. So I've got 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. We pull out our calculator. Right, so 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. Double check I typed it right. We hit enter. We get an answer of 1. So 1 is a positive answer, right? So if I have a positive answer, positive discriminant, means I have 2 real answers. I'm going to have 2 x-intercepts on my graph. Last one here. Now we have an a value of -6, a b value of 5, and c value of -2 at the end. So now if you want to try it by yourself, right, feel free to pause the video, try the formula by yourself, and see if you can get the right answer. Otherwise, right, just don't pause the video, follow along, see if you're understanding it. So, right, I'm going to do my discriminant formula. I'm feeling a little bit lazy, so I'm just going to write the dis equals my b squared minus 4 times the a value times the c value. Okay, so b squared is 5 squared. A is -6 and C is -2. Okay, I'm going to pull out my handy dandy calculator. We got 5 squared minus 4 times -6 times -2. We get -23 for our discriminant. Okay, so I get a negative answer. Negative answer means I'm going to get 2 imaginary answers.